We are now.
Just say yes. We on? Okay. What I want to do today is I want to highlight a couple products, and not necessarily products, but more of an understanding of how it is that we put together formulas and why we do the things that we do. And this goes back when we purchased the company from Chucker, from my dad. The first thing I sat down with him, I says, look, I says, you guys have been doing formulas for years. I need to know what your thought is. I need to know how you put these things together. And it's very simple, but it makes complete sense. And it is something that companies do not do, all right? They do not do it. Most companies out there will chase what I call the latest fad or the latest research. And they'll build a product based on that, okay? But when you look at it, let's just say, it's blood pressure that you're trying to affect, all right? You want balanced blood pressure. We'll just pick whatever. It could be anything. So let's just call it blood pressure. When we look at it and we go, okay, if we're looking to, in this case, lower blood pressure, there's going to be very specific plants out there, and there's research. And the beautiful thing was back in the 80s, we had access to research that no one else did. That's what made the company what it is. That's why it's so strong. And they call it a legacy company, meaning that it had the ability to go back. Formulas, some of our formulas are 1,500 years old. Some of them come out, and I've seen these papers. Some of them come out of, there's a book called the Pensao Kongmu, which is a write-up that the Chinese would do. They would hold a medicinal convention. Every 500 years they did this. And they would invite everyone from all over the country to come in and sit down and share what they found was working in their little part of the country. Makes sense? So you had all these, you can just kind of visualize these guys making the trek to come in. Well, the last year they did it was, I wanted to say 14 or 15, it was in the 1500s. And the last one they wrote up was called the Pensao Kongmu. Well, that book, they had the original, and they made one other additional copy. Now understand, when they're making a copy of it, it's all handwritten and hand drawn. So they're drawing what the plant is. Alrighty? So if you can imagine, this book was extremely valuable, and the copy was extremely valuable. Well, Bruce, one of my dad's friends and part of the formulating crew, Bruce did some work over in China and was given, as a gift, he was given this book, the copy of this book. Since then, the Chinese government has asked for it back, but it's not going back. But the bottom line is he received this book as a gift for doing work for them. And that book, they took it and they split it into two things and put it in two different safe spots. So half of it's in one, half of it's in another. But that book contained formulas or recipes of how to make things happen. Alrighty? And so that's why we have 100 different formulas. I mean, some of them are as subtle as how to stop a menstrual flow. Okay? The other ones are as subtle as how do you lower blood pressure or balance blood pressure? How do you raise blood pressure? Everything. What do you do for radiation poisoning? What do you do for autoimmune disease? What do you do for this? So in other words, these formulas were built around replacing pharmaceuticals, which came in at a later time, right, than the 1500s or earlier. But this Pensao was all of the Oriental herbal recipes that brought about these results. This was the medicinal book. They were it as far as medicine went. So from that, these guys access us. And Lisa and I went down to his research lab down in Loma Linda. It's outside of Loma Linda University. They're in the east side of LA. And we had to put gloves on, and we looked at these pages, and they were made out of rice paper. I mean, just pages. And I've got pictures of it. But we went down and saw all these different things. It was cool as can be. So when you're after an approach, and this is what you're after, is say decreasing blood pressure, you're going to go back and you're going to research and be able to research and know it's this plant does it, this plant does it, and this plant. All right? So 3 different plants. And don't ask me to quote off what the plants are called right this second, because I'm not going to tell you, or I don't know off the top of my head. But you've got these 3 different things. And this may be the primary one. This may be maybe 80% of what is good, and you'll come out that these 3, or even 4, 5, and 6, this is what's called a primary, which will cause this to happen, but it may cause it at the effect of something else. Does that make sense? And that's a big problem with drugs. Is yeah, you may cause the blood pressure to go down, but what are you doing to the kidneys? You may cause this to happen, you may cause you to lose weight or to, balance your sugar, but at what cost? Now, is your digestive system screwed up for the rest of your life? Is your kidneys not working? Are you heading for liver failure? Is your vision going? I mean, these are things that happen. So that's why when you read about a medicine, you're going to hear effect and a whole crap load of side effects. Everything from diarrhea to death. All right? And they're both in the same category. And that's just the way it is. Well, the way we looked at it says if we were to give just this, we might have the same problem. You might have an effect that you're not after. So if you go to a health food store, most health food stores will sell single herbs. That's how they work. So if you want echinacea, you go buy echinacea. Well, echinacea has an effect in the body, but there's also potentially other effects you may not want. So you look at it and you go, okay, here's the primary. What's the other things that need to be done here? Well, these are what are called secondary. I mean, either number 1, they're going to support the system to work better, okay? Or number 2, so it'll be the system. Or number 2, they're going to counter we'll call it a side effect for lack of a better word. They're going to counter a side effect. So by the time you put together this initial group, you've effectuated a change, looked at whatever systems could support this to be long-term, all right, not just have to take a medication or an herb as a medication for the rest of your life, but how is it that you balance out the body so the body takes over and starts doing what it's supposed to do again? That's the whole purpose, and minimize the side effects. Cool? After all this is done, all of this is put together, we found there was 2 problems. Number 1, sometimes the dosage was just big. Alrighty, and if you look at PubMD and what's it called, the NCMI or MCI or something of that name, I can't remember what it's called. But you look at those studies that are done, even on nutritionals, their quantity is huge. To get, if I have an effect with vitamin D, you get a whole, eat a whole house full. Make sense? Well, there was 2 things. Number 1, there are plants in the system. There's 21 different plants in the world that have the ability to boost the effectiveness of anything. Alrighty? They are called adaptogenic plants. And we were introduced to adaptogenic plants back in the 60s. The big one that was used here in the United States was American ginseng, Siberian ginseng, which has since been renamed as what's called Eleuthero. And Eleuthero came over from Siberia, and it was brought over to the United States by Bruce Halstead, who was the same doctor that had access to the Pensal, that has the Pensal. He was given it as a gift by a Dr. Ian Breckman out of Vladivostok, Russia, or Siberia, or the Soviet Union. And he actually was a guest to go over there and went over and did training with him. The two of them were real good buds. So the bottom line is that's the roots of this company. That's the roots of Professional Botanicals. I mean, it's huge. It's not something that's just willy-nilly we put two things together and, put them in a bottle because somebody did some research last week on how cool this is, you know what I mean? And create this little formula, and let's go out and we can market the heck out of it. And in 6 months when somebody finds something else, we'll park this one and do another one. No. We're after sustainability. We're after putting together the right botanicals to be able to cause the change to be long-term and effective. Cool? Now, so let's just say we got 6 key components by the time you do the primaries and the secondaries. Then you add adaptogens. And as I mentioned, there are 21 of them. We do not add all 21. We pick the most appropriate 5 adaptogenic plants for the formula and put it in as a blend. And all it is a booster. If you can imagine, it's a booster. And after that, the other problem with sick people, and most of the people that are eating this stuff are a little sick, because we microwave our food, we overheat it, we over this, we don't eat right, we're consuming GMO products that don't have any value, we overdo our fields, and so we're putting out great looking crops, but they don't have any nutritional value. I mean, back in the 50s, if you took a head of lettuce and can measure the amount of nutrition in it, today to get that same amount of nutrition in one head of lettuce back in the 50s, right now to get the same level of nutrition from the field, you would have to consume 20 heads of lettuce. When's the last time you went to a salad bar and had 20 heads of lettuce to be able to get your nutrition? Makes sense? So all of this affects our bodies. One of the biggest things is lack of absorption, lack of utilization, breakdown. So for that reason, we put enzymes in every single formula. Very specific enzymes that are targeted to help break down almost, when they get wet, they almost explode the product. Sometimes, have you ever had this before I did it this morning. I took my nutrition on an empty stomach. I had my water this morning along with my nutritional stuff, and I'm down taking care of patients, and I'm just like, I've got to put something on my stomach. Well, it's because it's exploded. I mean, it's going to town. And so it has an effect. And sometimes you got to buffer that a little bit with just a little bit of food. Makes sense? So, enzymes. And if you can see that, you can, but enzymes. This is what makes up a formula. Every single one, with the exception of our omega-3s, okay, every single one of our formulas goes through this right here. And we run it through filters to make sure that it's effective. We do a batch run. We send it out to our docs. We get feedback. Does it work? Does it not work? Oh man, I took it and I lost 30 pounds. Well, I took it and I got a sick stomach. All right, you got to look at these things and figure out how to adjust what needs to be adjusted. And this is just how you build a formula. And you go back on research that wasn't accessible to anyone back in the 80s. There was no internet. There was no Google it. There was no AI it. You had to know where it was and be able to dig it up. And that was the founders of Professional Botanicals. That's what they brought literally to the kitchen table to be able to discuss products. It was amazing. They would fly in people from China, never had anyone come over from the Soviet Union that I knew of, but China, South America, Central America, all over the United States, some in from Europe. These guys would be sitting at the kitchen table. When I come home from school to be at the house for a break, okay, these guys would be sitting around the kitchen table pounding out formulas and drawing upon all of their research, all of their experience. So you guys, this is this is the hot tamale. Tomorrow I've got a doctor flying in that with his company, he will only use professional, well, 99.999%. He's got one product that we don't make, but 99.99% he uses Professional Botanicals products and teaches this worldwide. Utilized in hospitals, in some countries, utilized in all doctors' office, all types of doctors' office throughout the world. Why? Because he says, look, you have a legacy company. You have a company that makes sense. You're not chasing the latest fad. You're building a foundation that has the ability to take us into centuries ahead of us. You're carrying forward that pensal that China did every 5 years by creating your formulas. So he's coming in and we're just going to go through every formula and figure out protocols on it. Okay. Now, for those that are asking, I'd like to get the protocols. Understand, protocols and how these things are used are very, very highly restricted. FDA, don't tell anyone, don't tell them what they do. This is real. And so we can't publish that as a company, but some of these doctors out there may bring it up in their teachings and how they teach, or they may post it or whatever. And that's up to them, but we as a company can't necessarily do it. Okay? So, any questions on formulas? Has this been good? Mm-hmm. Helpful to understand the power of what we got? Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next 2 weeks.